With the release of Sun Tzu Prime, Rise of Kingdoms continues to feel like Rise of Infantry because arguably they are still the best troop type in the game. So today I'm bringing you guys my up-to-date infantry guide for 2026. But before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I'm a sponsored partner creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, consider subscribing down below. And god dang it, Tiger, what are you doing? And of course, don't forget to leave a like down below either, right, Tiger? It's almost dinner time, so she's very excited. Okay, now before we talk about what the best infantry pairs are, which by the way, you can use timestamps if you want to jump around this video, the first thing I want to do is just kind of describe what an infantry main is, because I feel like a lot of new players come into these videos, they come into these guides and they think, okay, I'm going to build my entire account around infantry. And while that is a decent strategy, you should always remember that being a main of a troop type just typically means that you have more of that troop type than any other troop type. So you're still gonna run an infantry, archer, and cavalry march in the end game eventually. You don't have to run all those right now if you're a new player, but the idea of being a main for a troop type is just like, okay, if you're gonna run two of any troop types, maybe you're gonna pick infantry to run two armies. That's when you have to dig into the weeds a little bit and figure out what are the ways that you would split up the best infantry commanders to make two good pairs. And furthermore, as you get into the deep end game and you're running 6 or 7 marches, you might be running 3 of a given troop type. Now, with all that being said, should you be an infantry main in Rise of Kingdoms? Well, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like ever since 2022, at least the end of 2022, the game has really seemed like it has shifted into favoring infantry a little bit more than other troop types. Of course, archers have Emperor Chin, which can't be ignored, but that's kind of like all they have until the upcoming archer release, which check out my last video if you missed it, where we talk about what we can expect from that release. And then of course you have cavalry, which are strong with combo damage, but I do still feel like they struggle a little bit more than infantry when it comes to building at least 2 different armies of just cavalry. Now, they have the advantage of march speed across all of their most powerful commanders, but really I feel like infantry lately have been the safest and easiest to recommend as the best troop type in Rise of Kingdoms. That is not to say that that will continue forever. A majority of Rise of Kingdoms has been cavalry dominated, but lately it's definitely been infantry, and I imagine at some point down the road archers are going to have their time in the spotlight as well. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here, and maybe I should have said this earlier, but this is an open field video, okay? We're not going to be going over rally combos, garrison combos, and all that other stuff, because 95% of you guys are just going to be open field fighters anyway, and that's what I do, and that's what I know best here on the channel, so that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, now let's talk about the best civilization for infantry, because in the last year things have changed a little bit for civilizations as far as how they work, because now you actually can pick a special unit and then pick the attributes of a different civilization. And this is really interesting because, as many of you probably know, the throwing axemen from France have the highest base health stat out of any troop in the entire game. It's only by a little bit, but because now you can separate these, you might as well grab the throwing axemen. And if you don't want to use a civ change and you just want to keep the base bonuses from France, 3% health and hospital healing speed plus 20%, that's pretty good as well. However, if you do decide to actually change away from France, then what I would recommend is either going with Rome for the march speed, like literally that's the main reason here. The defense is just a little bonus, you're getting it for the march speed, or you could go for Maya, because now you can keep the special unit from France and get all that extra health, plus you also get the normal damage plus 3% here, which is going to be really good for everything involving infantry, including dealing smite damage, which is the name of the game for infantry. If you guys are brand new to the game, somehow you didn't know that, in the end game they deal smite damage, at least at the time of recording this. Who knows what the rest of the year or next year might bring. The cool thing about the stats for France and for Maya, by the way, is that the normal damage here and the health here is for all troop types. So even though you are an infantry main and you really run mostly that, you're still probably going to run a cav or archer, and in that case those stats are universal. So it's a nice little micro optimization here, but I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about your civilization. Most of the time you're not even going to notice when you change. You're probably not going to see your reports change that much anyway, so just keep that in mind. I'll touch on this very briefly, but when it comes to city skins, obviously you just pick the ones that have infantry stats, whether it's infantry health, which is typically what I would prefer, or you could go with something like infantry attack or defense. Now, for me personally, I'm actually leaning more towards attack over defense these days, because I feel like, first of all, infantry have a ton of defense, and now we get get defense from crystal tech as well, I feel like the attack just might matter a little bit more there, so keep that in mind. The other thing, however, is that they did just add the Hawa Mahal to the kvk shop. This gives you 8% troop defense, and that is for all troop types, and so I think this is probably like universally the best open field skin right now if you can get your hands on this. I believe it takes 6 kvk coins, so I think it's super expensive, but if you can get it, this is also a great place to go. And then of course, if you've got a Zenith skin, then go with the Zenith skin, but most of you won't have that. Okay, now that we've got all the basics out of the way, let's talk about what infantry armies should you be building towards in the end game in 2026. Now, if you've seen previous videos of mine, you know that up until Sun Tzu Prime came into the game, my opinion was that Bai Chi with Liu Che was the single best infantry army in the entire game, and that was a very uncontroversial opinion. Everyone agreed, it was obvious this was the best infantry pairing in the game if you're only going to run one, and this pair is still incredibly good. I don't want anybody to confuse you, this is still very solid. I used it in my last kvk. It performs super well. Obviously you're going to be using the pincer formation for a majority of these armies, and unless I say otherwise, just assume that you're going to use the pincer formation. Okay, that being said, we now live in a world where Sun Tzu Prime is in the game, and as you guys know, he is an absolute monster. And so what I would recommend in terms of a single best infantry army in Rise of Kingdoms today, the answer is either Sun Tzu Prime with Bai Chi or Sun Tzu Prime with Liu Che. Whichever one you actually have, if you only have one, go ahead and run that. It's pretty much fine either way, and the reason for that is because the Bai Chi combo is more all in on maximum damage, whereas the Liu Che combo has a little bit of a better rage engine and also has a little bit more well-rounded stats. So you lose a little bit of attack, but you gain some defense, and again, the expertise on Liu Che is just so good. With the combo attack, you have more chances to deal extra damage. Just know that whether you have Liu Che or you have Bai Chi, either one is going to be really good here, and because of the way that Sun Tzu Prime's active skill works, you're always going to want him as the primary commander. In fact, he's pretty much the only single target damage commander. I say that in quotes because really he's AoE true damage, but he's really the only single target damage commander that like you don't feel bad running as the primary because he's functionally not single target damage. Now we'll talk again more about that later when we touch on William Wallace, but that's going to be my recommendation for the single best infantry march in the game. Okay, so if you want max damage, go with that. If you want a little bit more well-rounded and more procs of different things, go with this, and then you're good to go. What are you going to do if you need to run 2 infantry pairs, however? And this is kind of the boat that I find myself in for whatever my next kvk happens to be, and here you actually have a lot of different options. And I think this is kind of the brilliance of Sun Tzu, is that the way he's built, you don't really feel bad about running him with anybody. He has synergy with a lot of different infantry commanders that are already in the game right now, and so there's not really a single best option, but there's more so what the best option is for you. And so I'm going to give you guys a couple of different options that you can run, and whichever one sounds like it would fit your account the most, go ahead and pick that one. The first thing that I want to touch on is actually splitting up, of course, the Sun Tzu, and then you pull the Bai Chi over here, you slap William Wallace behind him, and I think this is a really good option to pick if you have one set of gear and armaments that is clearly superior to another. And in that case, obviously you're going to throw your best gear and armaments on your Sun Tzu Liu Che. You're going to pop off with the rage engine here, and you're going to have a blast. You put your second best set of gear and armaments on your Bai Chi William Wallace, and this is just a tried and true march that people have been using ever since Bai Chi landed in the game. Pretty much having William Wallace as the secondary here is just fine. He is single target damage, and as you guys know, if you've been watching the channel for a long time, usually we want the single target damage commander to be the secondary commander, because in the instance of an open field fight where you're fighting and dealing damage but you have to quickly retreat, you don't want to be retreating when only your primary has cast and your secondary didn't get a chance to cast, and that secondary is the AoE, right? Because the AoE is where all of the damage actually is on these commanders. That's not just infantry, that's with all troop types in the entire game. Rise of Kingdoms has always favored AoE damage in the open field. Okay, and so that's kind of a micro optimization, but you'd be surprised how big of a deal that actually makes in real world fighting. And that's especially true for players who are in kvks where you can't do like the stacking method where you like zoom all the way in and stack all your armies. That's really good in like really high end KVKs where the balls aren't moving that much and they're kind of all fighting all at once, that's a great strategy. But for most people who are in KVKs where the open field movement is back and forth and you can't really just stand still, or otherwise you get overrun and wiped, you definitely want to have your secondary commander be the single target damage commander. Now, in the event that both of your gear sets are the same power level, meaning you have two really good sets of infantry gear and you have two really good sets of armaments, what you could do is actually just swap these secondary commanders, right? And the way that this works is that you just run the Bai Chi Liu Che, you just leave that alone. That is a tried and true pair. It works really, really well. And you slap the William Wallace behind the Sun Tzu Prime, and the synergy here is actually quite good. Now, this is primarily because Sun Tzu Prime's active skill turns William Wallace into an AoE commander, which is literally like one of the worst parts about William Wallace is that he's only single target damage, right? And so obviously if you can fix that, then you would want to fix that, right? And so this is a very safe place to put your William Wallace. But the synergy gets even better because the third skill on William Wallace boosts a single shot of smite damage by 40%. Now this has a 10-second cooldown, so unfortunately it's not going to happen every skill cycle. But when you look at, okay, what damage factor do you want to boost by 40%, the answer is the biggest one, right? The biggest number times 1.4, that's what you want to do. It just so happens to be the case that Sun Tzu Prime's active skill is 3000 damage factor. Okay, so that is like the single highest number that you could multiply by 1.4 here, and that synergy ends up working out really, really well. Beyond that though, the expertise of William Wallace says whenever you use an active skill or is slowed, it cleanses all slow effects and then grants 3 nearby allies a damage absorbing mighty shield with a factor of 1000 for 2 seconds. Now the thing about Sun Tzu Prime is that his active skill rage requirement is only 900, and he also has a little bit of a rage engine on the 4th skill here. You get 20 rage for every enemy that's hit with the military sage effect here, so you're gaining a lot of rage. You need less rage to cast anyway, which means you're going to be casting your active skills a little bit faster with Sun Tzu Prime than pretty much any other infantry commander, which also means you're going to be cleansing yourself a lot and you're going to be giving out those shields quite a bit. Now again, you still got a 10-second cooldown here, which is another reason why historically I like to dunk on William Wallace, because he's got like, he's just like so close to like every little skill has just one like inexcusable drawback. But I'm trying really hard in this video to make him work, okay, so just bear with me here. But all that being said, I think Sun Tzu Prime with William Wallace is a solid way to run a 2-army infantry lineup. But let's say you don't have William Wallace because you knew that he wasn't a good investment when he first came out. Maybe you weren't convinced he's single target damage. Maybe you watched my channel and you were like, hey, this thing Omni keeps saying he sucks, I'm not going to get him. And frankly, I don't think you should regret that at all. He's not going to make or break your account even with a Sun Tzu Prime in the game. Okay, so let's say you don't have William Wallace, or let's say you find yourself in a KVK where you're relying very heavily on instant proc damage. So what might that look like? Well, maybe you're going up against enemies that just overpower you, right? And you're just constantly being overwhelmed in the field, and you're finding that you're not sticking to the target as much as you want to. You're getting pushed back a lot and you're really relying on that instant proc damage. And then you run the Liu Che with either Alex or with Philip. Now this is also a good option for you if you have a really strong arch set of armaments still. I know a lot of you do not have that. You might, if you obviously still run this, maybe you're waiting for the next formation to come out before you make that jump, or maybe you have an arch set because you're a garrison leader, something like that. This would be a great 2-army lineup to run. The difference between the Alex and Philip is kind of negligible. If you have another place that you'd rather use your Philip, then you could do that, that's fine. The Alex, quite frankly, is faster in the open field and you can't reduce his damage, plus this 4-second debuff is absolutely devastating, and he has more stats just period than Philip. So the advantage to Philip of course is that he deals slightly more damage and he has a nice rage reduction here, and his active skill does give you a nice little buff for a couple of seconds for your nearby allies, and you have a chance to cast active skills again. But this doesn't happen as much as you would want it to, unfortunately, so keep that in mind. But Philip is a perfectly good option to use as a secondary to Liu Che as well. Okay, now for those of you that don't know, the reason these pairs work so well is the expertise. You launch an extra combo attack which has a chance of triggering that instant proc damage that we see on Philip or on Alex as well. Okay, so if you're new here, that's how that works. But now let's get into the Ivar the Boneless. Okay, so we're going to be throwing these instant proc commanders in the garbage here, and you're just going to run Sun Tzu Prime primary, Ivar the Boneless secondary, and then you're just going to rock the Bai Chi Liu Che. Now the reason that this works is actually very simple. First of all, the reason that I say this for last is because you should not get Ivar unless you are rally leader. Okay, next time they release an infantry commander, or maybe even the next time they release a strong open field leadership or whatever, this is very much not going to last. Okay, I'm promising you. And I don't want you to waste sculptures doing this. Even though you technically can run this as 5511 in the field, it's still not worth throwing 190 sculptures into Ivar, in my opinion, when you know that he is going to be benched probably within a year or less. But if you're a rally leader, and especially if you're a rally leader with talented accessories like the Horn of Fury, this is a really good way to go. And the reason for that is because Ivar is literally just a beat stick. Okay, this is a term that I have used in the past to describe certain commanders. For example, I also used to use this term when we talked about Tariq. I actually used to run Tariq in the open field, and he is literally just what I call a vanilla beat stick. He just deals damage and gives you stats. That's pretty much it. Now Ivar is better than Tariq because he is a 3 target damage factor of 2500, really good stuff, and he also has a rage engine. So just like Sun Tzu Prime's 4th skill, you also have a rage engine on the active skill of Ivar the Boneless. So you get 15 rage per second for 3 seconds. That is 45 extra rage. And so while this won't work before your first active skill cycle, it will work as you stay connected to the target. And then of course the second skill gives you 10% health, 30% attack, 20% march speed. The other 2 skills don't do anything in the field. And then the expertise says you take 10% less normal damage, and when you drop below 50, you take an extra 5% less normal damage as well. Okay, so this is, again, if you run at 5511, you're not going to have this, but if you have him expertise because you're a rally leader, you're going to be even more tanky in the field with the Ivar secondary to your Sun Tzu Prime. Okay, again, this will probably change within a year or less, but it's still worth noting because it's just a great way to run a bunch of AoE smite damage and true damage in the field, so I had to mention it. But what should you run if you're gonna run 3 infantry armies in the open field? Well, in this case, you probably are going to be a whale, right? Most players who are running 3 of a particular troop type, they probably should be someone who's like really a high-end player, super late game, because running 3 armies implies that you have 3 sets of gear that are open field viable, 3 sets of armaments that are open field viable. And so if that's the case, there's a good chance that you have Ivar the Boneless. Okay, so let's go over a couple of different options with Ivar, and then a couple of different options without Ivar, because I know not all of you will have him. He is a Mightiest Governor commander, and maybe you're in a kingdom that you're not going to compete for it, at least not right now. So the first thing that I would do here is move these apart, and you're going to run Bai Chi with William Wallace like you did before, and then you're going to run the Liu Che with either the Alex or the Philip. Again, this is a great option if you have an arch set in particular. Otherwise, I'm a little bit on the fence about this. Okay, obviously if you have the pincer formation, that's not going to do anything for your secondaries here, so just keep that in mind. The other thing that you could do, which I know a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction to this, but the other option that you could do here is literally just running the Ragnar CPO. Unfortunately, I know that a lot of people like to dunk on this commander pairing right now, and really the only reason is it's slow. I mean, that is really it. And I know I say it's the only reason. It's a big deal, right? Especially for infantry, being slow is a big deal, unfortunately. But when you're running 3 of a troop type, like, you kind of have to scrape together the best of the best, and honestly that means you probably will have to run Ragnar CPO, unfortunately, right? Of course, this does require that you still have a wedge set for infantry. I would not recommend building a wedge set these days. I would also not recommend building an arch set these days unless you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. So this is really just something you would run if you're an old player and you've still got that stuff. If you're a new player, you're not going to be building towards a Ragnar CPO march. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you are in this camp but you don't have the Ivar, you're just going to slap that William Wallace up here and you are good to go. That's going to be the way that you're going to run this. This is another great option for 3 infantry armies. But I know what you're saying, Omni. I just freaking hate the Ragnar. I can't stand him. I can't stand looking at him. He just makes me so mad. He boils my blood. Okay, all right, fine. We'll move him. We'll retire him. Let's just say that you don't want to run the Ragnar CPO because you just don't like him. You're superstitious, this, or you had a bad experience, you had a bad dream, whatever the case might be. I know for my last KVK, Ragnar CPO didn't perform super well either, so I get it. Okay, I get it. You're willing to experiment because that's how fed up you are. Okay, that's fair. That's totally fine. The other thing that you could do is then you would actually have to move your Bai Chi back up to Sun Tzu. Then you would have to run the Alex or the Philip here behind your Liu Che, and then you'd have to bring in the Chook. Okay, you would have to run the William Wallace with the Chook here, or you could do something like this if you're an absolute mad lad. Doing this actually continues to make your William Wallace an AoE commander, which I do really like. I almost would rather do this, to be frank, because this dude's got less march speed than you think. Okay, he's got 15%, but the problem with that is that the true damage on Sun Tzu scales off of the smite damage dealt, and you're not dealing a lot of smite damage here. So unfortunately, you're gonna be doing something like this. Okay, that's just how it's gonna be. It's how it's gonna go. I know I said that you want the AoE commander as the primary, and while that's kind of true here, I mean, like, the active skill on Chook does deal more damage than the active skill on William Wallace. I know, shocking, KVK2 commander, but that's just, you know, things you got to think about when you're dealing with William Wallace. The thing is, like, you do want the 40% bonus on the third skill of William Wallace to apply to his active skill more likely, so that's kind of why you would run this. Frankly, this army is not going to be super good compared to your other armies, so just keep that in mind. Also, this army is a little bit squishy, so that's another huge problem here. But again, you said you didn't want to run the Ragnar CPO, which is very tanky, by the way. It's just very slow, so this is another option that you could pick. But frankly, if you force me to pick the best 3-army lineup for infantry right now, it's either going to be this or this. So you can pick your poison. If you just want the best of the best, you're gonna need Ivar. It just is what it is. And again, I would not recommend getting Ivar if you're not a rally commander. Okay, so pick one of the other lineups if that is you. Okay, now when it comes to equipment, there's a couple of different builds that I would recommend to you guys, but there are two that are kind of the most universal, right? And what I mean by that is, you know, as new commanders come out, they all have different stats, right? Some of them have more attack and less health. Some of them have a little bit less attack but more health. Some of them have no health at all, but they've got some extra defense. So as new commanders come out, the best set sometimes changes slightly. It's like a micro optimization. You just get, oh, you get a little bit more out of it, you just a little. And like, look, it's not worth building an entire set for a single commander pairing, because when they release a new commander, that might not be the most optimal set, right? So what you want to do is build sets that throughout the history of Rise of Kingdoms have been adjacent to the best set or the best set period, right? And so in that case, what I would recommend is either doing a 2-2-2 setup where you have the 2 KVK pieces, you have the 2 gold key pieces, or I should say crystal key pieces, and then you've got the 2-piece set bonus with the gloves and the boots. This is a tried and true set. Unfortunately, it has a lot of infantry defense, but fortunately, commanders like Bai Chi and commanders like William Wallace don't actually have any defense, so it kind of works out pretty well with those commanders. Now, the downside of this, you know, because of course this has like the most stats, although I guess maybe technically there's a couple of micro optimizations to be made there. The other option would be something like this, where you have a 4-piece set and you've got the 2 crystal key pieces. Now, this has a huge advantage in that it gives you march speed. You get, I know I'm in the way here, you get plus 10% march speed, which is kind of insane. This is so hard to give up. It actually hurts me. It pains me to give this up when I'm going to be running my Sun Tzu Prime for the next KVK. Obviously, as you can see, I have built one of each. I've prioritized the one with more stats. Now I'm going to go in and prioritize and finish up the rest of what I have to do here for the second set. Worth noting, the boots are probably the most important thing to get to iconic tier 5, because you get the extra march speed, and fleeted footman gives you even more outside of territory plus some stats, which is quite nice, but it is expensive. But I did just want to point that out. Now, of course, if you have one of each of these sets, then you're going to put the one without the 10% march speed bonus on the commander pairing. That is the faster of the two, right? So in this case, this set is going to go on my Sun Tzu Prime, because Sun Tzu Prime has more march speed than any other infantry legendary, right? He has 25%, so just by default he's going to bridge that gap just a little bit, right? Because typically you want all of your armies to kind of move around the same speed, so they're not like getting to the battle at completely different times. By the time your infantry get here, your cows are already dead, right? Like, that's super annoying, and you can kind kind of control that with crystal tech, but I digress. Those are the two different builds that I would recommend for infantry. I know some builds use like some leadership legs and things like that, and if you want to go in the weeds and micro optimize there, you can, but just know it's not worth dismantling stuff to go and build that unless you're like a super giga whale rally garrison leader, right? Like if you've already been building towards something, don't have buyer's remorse, like just keep going in that direction. And eventually we are going to have a legendary equipment swap event or reset event. I think that's in April, but we don't have the full details yet. Subscribe if you don't want to miss that. We will release a video when it comes around. And the last thing to touch on is the talent builds. Now I have been showing this talent build since my commanders came into the game, and really I don't think there's a single thing that I would change here except maybe these 2 points. Okay, so basically you grab strong of body, you grab fleet of foot, you must get these 2 points into infantry march speed, then you've got 3 points left over, and there's a couple of places you could put them. You could put 2 points into defense and then 1 point into health, whether that's here or that's here, or you could take these 2 points of defense and put them into attack if you want to deal the most amount of damage. Or the other thing you could do is put 3 points into to the bitter end. To the bitter end is something that stacks very slow, and frankly I just am not committed to micro optimizing to make this work. It just is a lot of effort, right? It's a lot of effort. You're gonna have to stay in battle for like 30 seconds or something insane to get the maximum benefit here. I don't know if it's 30 or 40, but really it's not worth it. Same thing with pack a punch. This is not worth grabbing. You're gonna probably take more damage than you're gonna deal, most likely, especially in big AoE open field fights. So that is that. I do not get hold the line. I do not think that this is worth it at all, especially when you compare the trade-off is march speed. I think the march speed is much more valuable than hold the line these days, because this only reduces damage when you are hit with a basic attack. Okay, so not AoE smite damage, not AoE skill damage. It's like someone has to be hitting your army for this to even possibly trigger, and it's a 10% chance. I'd rather just get that extra march speed and get the hell out of there. That's just how I'm looking at it. That's how I've always looked at it. And then of course you go all the way up to thunderous smite here. If you're going to be running Liu Che as a primary with your Alex or Philip, I'm going to point you in this direction as far as talent trees go. You're going to grab fight to the death here because it is worth it. It's more damage dealt than taking here. You're also going to grab effortless because unlike the talent in the smite tree, what is it called over here, to the bitter end, effortless actually starts on turn 1. So you actually enter combat with 2.5% bonus to damage. Okay, so you actually start with that, which is quite good. Then you come up here and grab martial mastery, which is quite good as well. Then you're going to go ahead and get all the march speed that we normally do, put a single point into snare of thorns. You're going to put 4 points and hold the line, 1 point in defense, 1 point in health, and you are good to go. The reason that you have 1 point here is because it's just a nice little slowdown, and really where else are you going to put it, right? You want an extra 0.5% of counterattack damage, maybe you want a 0.5% of attack, maybe. I think this nice little bonus slowdown is pretty cool, so I put 1 point in snare of thorn. And then of course if you are running the Ragnar CPO, this is the talent build I'm going to give you guys. I grab of course feral nature, 3 points in latent power because you deal a lot of additional damage with Ragnar and with CPO, and then you grab strong of body, and the march speed is pretty much non-negotiable here with the Ragnar Prime. He's just super slow getting to the battle, so like you need this, really, you need this. Even with this and with the 4-piece set bonus, my Ragnar was still slower than pretty much everything else, so just keep that in mind. And then the last tip I'll give you is with armaments, and I know I already said use the pincer formation for pretty much everything, and that is true, but what I will tell you is that when you're looking at your wish list, you probably want to get right of the 9 cauldrons. Okay, put this as your wish list. The reason is because annals of the 9 cauldrons is something you get from the KVK shop, so there is a guaranteed way to get this. Same thing with banner of the 9 cauldrons. Okay, getting your hands on airtight is a very long journey, but it is guaranteed to happen eventually from the superior shop over here. You can grab airtight for 8 of these inscription shards, so it's going to take forever. Okay, forever ever, but you can do it. I did it. It'll take a while, but you can do it guaranteed. Okay, so that just leaves the instrument and the metal, and both of these are very good, so you can't really go wrong here. But I think Demolisher is a little bit more unique. You still get half of the boost from Seal of the 9 Cauldrons, but you also get a very unique 50% defense ignore which I think is really cool. Also, you have a chance at gaining rage as well. So I like the instrument here more than the seal, but it's up to you. But this is my recommendation for the wish list. And with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for my updated guide for infantry in Rise of Kingdoms in 2026. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. What commander pairs are you running with your Sun Tzu Prime? And while you're down there, consider dropping a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel a ton. And you might think you're subscribed to the channel because you've seen a lot of my raw content, but you're actually not. Double check down below because we are so close to 100,000 subs, which is insane. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.